It wasn't the ceremonial, it was the law itself. What was going on here in Galatia was that Judaizing Christians were coming in trying to add the book of Moses, or the book of the covenant, to the Christian covenant. And we won't get there tonight, but in chapter 4 we see clearly that Paul is identifying that there are two covenants. And he uses as symbols two women. One of them, Hagar, which of course was Sarah's slave, handmaiden, who gave birth to Ishmael, and the other one's Sarah. So he's saying that Hagar represents the Sinai covenant and corresponds to the present Jerusalem, and if you look in chapter 3, corresponds to the book of the law. Now we see in Genesis chapter 26 that God speaking to Isaac, he's saying, now let me tell you why I made a covenant with your father Abraham. I made a covenant with him because he kept my laws, statutes, and commandments. You see. So it's not just about blind faith. You know, if you listen to Protestantism, sometimes you'd think that all they're talking about, you know, Abraham just had blind faith. And that wasn't it at all. I mean, Abraham, you know, before you can keep something, when you say, Isaac, your father kept my laws, my statutes, and my commandments, it's only done in obedience if you know what they are and you yield yourself to them. Isn't that right? He didn't do it accidentally. It wasn't that, well, he just happened to accidentally live his life in a certain way that wasn't in violation of God's laws and statutes and commandments. You know, you see, he yielded himself to what God had instructed him. And we see that clearly. God, we don't have in the scriptures a specific moment in time where we can say, now turn to, you know, Genesis chapter 24, verse 17, and we can see here where God specifically spelled out his laws, statutes, and commandments to Abraham. We don't have that. But when he says to Isaac, I made a covenant with your father because he kept my laws, statutes, and commandments, then it's a safe assumption to believe and to take as truth that Abraham knew God's laws, his statutes, and his commandments. Amen. So what we have here now, what we're going to see in chapter 3 is that these Judaizing Christians, you see, were then trying to bring in the whole book of the law. In other words, laws that were added because of transgressions, you see. And it was contained in the book of the law. So that was a problem that was going on here. So in the Galatian church, we see it as a Gentile congregation. We're in Galatians chapter 1, Bob and Gerald. We see that this is a Gentile congregation, not just a congregation, but congregations, multiple congregations in one city. And we see that there were people saying that they were coming from Jerusalem. They were Jews, and they were saying that your covenant is not complete. You're not keeping all the requirements of the covenant. And they began to bring in these different laws. So, let's begin in verse 1. Paul, an apostle, not sent from men, nor through the agency of men, but through Jesus Christ and God and Father, who raised him from the dead, and to all the brethren who are with me, to the churches at Galatia. Now, when we see this here, look, now notice, Paul is making it a point to say, men did not send me. Nobody in Jerusalem sent me. No organization sent me. My gospel, my message is not from men, not from any organization of men, but from God. Now that is a lofty statement, but it's true. And so he's saying this, and we'll see it later, because certain men had come from Jerusalem, you see. And they said, we're coming from Jerusalem. Now, that is the birthplace of Christianity, and we know what the requirements of Christianity is. And we are presenting them to you. And what Paul is saying, as he says other places, look, are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Jews? So am I. Or he says, I was a Pharisee of the strictest sect. I was of the tribe of Benjamin, circumcised on the 8th day. And he's saying that, he says, and I was surpassing all my contemporaries in Judaism. So don't think I don't know. I do know. I know the scriptures. I know what they're teaching you. I can teach it better than they can. But the problem is, it's not the truth. And I'm here to preach, notice, and we'll see this, the truth of the gospel. There is a truth of the gospel. Now, listen, it may seem harmless. In fact, it does seem harmless to me. I mean, I know it's not. I've witnessed the fruits that it is not. But it seems harmless to just add some of the, a body of laws, because the laws of Moses were good. The laws given to Moses in the book of the law, the book of the covenant, are from God. Moses didn't make them up. They're God's laws, and they're still in effect to this day to those who are under that covenant. And it may seem, well, these are God's laws, and it may seem like it's a harmless thing to bring those laws into Abraham's house, into his covenant, to lift the mercy seat and take them from being placed on the outside to putting them under the mercy seat and inside. Those laws are not under the mercy seat. They're on the outside. They're good. They're for a purpose. But they're not the end. They don't accomplish the goal. They were added because of transgressions, because something was wrong. We see lots of things in our world because of sin, because something went wrong. We see lots of beauty, but we see lots of evil in this world. And it is because something has gone wrong. Every rose has its thorn. We see the beautiful antelope and deer grazing, but predators are never far away. You see, they can't help it. They have to eat. They can't eat. They can't digest grass. You see, something is wrong. When you look at the universe, you see the beauty, but you see that the universe itself is a very violent place.